In 1933, a man could stand at the edge of a strange town and know, before he knocked on a single door, which house would feed him and which one kept a shotgun behind the screen. He learned it not from a person, but from a fence post. A few lines of chalk, a scratch in soft pine, a smudge of coal on the leg of a water tank, and the whole town opened up to him like a page he already knew how to read. We have forgotten how to read the world that way. We pass 100 quiet signs a day and see none of them, and we would not know a true warning if it were carved into the wood beneath our own hands. 6 years later, in the spring of 1939, a photographer for a British magazine called Picture Post followed one of these men for a story they titled The Life of a Tramp. On the 1st of April, he caught the picture that outlived them all, a roadman named John Walpole, reaching up to chalk a small cross on the wall of a farmhouse, the mark that told the next hungry stranger that these people had been kind. It is the picture caught in the act of being true. The men who rode the rails called the name a man, left behind him a Monica. And before this is over, you will understand why that one word carried more weight than any of them. There were marks for food and marks for water, and there were marks that could get you killed. Number 12 is the one that taught a man never to knock twice. And number 2 was written down by one of the most famous authors America ever produced, decades before anyone dared call this a folk tale. We are counting down 20 of the lost marks of the road, from the gentle to the deadly to the one that held the whole secret. Let us begin. Number 20. A kind woman lives here. Picture the cat drawn small and plain at the corner of a gatepost, the way a child might scratch it, 2 ears and a curve of tail. Every roadman learned that little animal early, because the cat meant a woman inside who would not turn him away. You came to the back door with your hat in your hands, and you asked, and she gave, a plate of beans or the heel of a loaf, and she asked nothing in return. In a year when a full day of labor might bring a single dollar, that plate was the difference between walking on and lying down. Henry Dreyfuss gathered the cat among the road signs in his symbol sourcebook, and the Boy Scout founder Dan Beard had set down its cousins as far back as 1918, which tells you the mark was old before the Depression ever made it famous. Today, the cat survives only behind museum glass in Britt, Iowa, where the old hobos still gather, one stranger in 2 strokes of chalk, vouching for the goodness of another stranger's mother. Before we go on, do one thing for the person who comes after you. Subscribe, because the marks are about to turn, and the one waiting at number 12 is the one that could have gotten your grandfather killed for nothing more than a knock on the wrong door. Number 19, the handout, the angel food. A simple cross no taller than a thumb meant a place where a hungry man could be fed, though the food here came with a price that was not money. They called it angel food, the meal you earned by sitting through a sermon first, head bowed, while your stomach argued with the preacher. A man learned to take the gospel with his gravy and call it a fair trade. In the lean years, a hot meal was a hot meal, and pride was a luxury you left at the city limits. The next sign a man hunted for was the one that kept him alive longer than any meal ever could. Number 18, clean water and a safe place to sleep. The mark was a wavy line, the old picture of running water drawn above a small cross made of 2 strokes. It told a roadman that his shoulders could come down from around his ears. It meant the creek here was clean enough to drink, and the ground beside it was safe enough to lie on through the night. You learned fast that bad water killed more men on the road than any railroad bull ever did, quietly, days later, far from anyone who knew your name. So the mark for good water was close to sacred, and a man would walk an extra mile to reach it. And if he woke sick in spite of it, there was a mark for that too. Number 17. A doctor here will not charge you. A cross with a small smile tucked into one corner meant a physician who would look at a roadman's fever or his ruined feet and ask nothing for it. For men who owned nothing but the clothes they stood in, who could not have paid a doctor with a year of wages, that smiling cross was as good as a cure. You remembered the towns that carried it, and you spoke of them to the next man you met at the fire. The mark survives now only as a curiosity copied into design books, its kindness gone abstract. Once it meant a man might keep his leg. Number 16. A good place to catch out. Down near the yards, on a tank leg or a tie pile, a mark told a man where he could climb aboard a moving train without a railroad bulls club waiting for him. To catch out clean was everything, because the wrong yard cost you your freedom or your legs. Whole towns were known by these marks, passed mouth to mouth at the fires, and confirmed in chalk at the rail. It was the closest thing a roadman had to a ticket, and it was free, and it was written by men who would never meet the man who used it. That was the gentle half of the language. The other half was about to begin. Every mark until now was a door held open, a plate of food, a clean creek, a kind doctor, a safe way onto the train. But a man on the road learned quickly that the world was not all open doors, and the marks that kept him alive were not the kind ones. They were the warnings, and the first of them had teeth. Number 15. A dog will sound the alarm here. A short row of jagged lines like teeth set on edge, and a roadman slowed his step. It meant a dog lived here that would bark the moment your boot touched the path, and a barking dog in the dark could turn a sleeping house against you before you ever opened your mouth. You did not always know whether the people inside were kind or cruel, only that you would not get the chance to find out quietly. So you passed, or you waited for daylight. A few strokes on a fence, and a man kept the night on his side, but the bark was only a warning. The next mark meant the dog was kept to draw blood. Number 14. A vicious dog kept to bite. Not the noisy farm dog of the last mark, but an animal trained to put a stranger on the ground. The sign warned you to keep clear of the whole property, fence and gate and yard, because what waited there would take a piece of you, and there was no doctor for miles, no smiling cross on this road. A torn leg was not an inconvenience out there. It was a slow sentence, infection setting in over days of walking. Men told stories of the marks they wished they had seen in time, and of the friends who had not. And worse than any dog was the man who smiled while he robbed you. Number 13. Nothing to be gained here, and a man who will cheat you. This mark warned of the householder who would promise a roadman a day's work, let him split the whole woodpile, and then turn him off at dusk with nothing, or worse, set the law on him for trespass once the labor was done. In years when $1 was a day's wage, and a day's wage was the whole world, a stolen day was a kind of violence. The mark did not warn of a fist or a fang. It warned of a handshake. And among men who had so little, the ones who would take even that were remembered longest and marked most carefully. Number 12. A man with a gun lives here. Here is the mark I promised you. A small triangle, sometimes drawn with a pair of hands beside it, and it meant the man inside that house answered his door with a barrel. You did not knock here, you did not test it. A hungry stranger on the porch of a frightened armed man was a story that ended in a single sound, with no one left to tell it. The honest truth, the one the historians press on us, is that many homeowners never knew a mark sat on their gatepost at all, and assumed there must be some code only because the hungry kept arriving. But the men on the road believed, and a belief that keeps you off a deadly porch is its own kind of true. One wrong knock was all it took. Beyond the gun lay the law. Number 11, the law here will put you in chains. Two circles linked together, the old picture of handcuffs, and it meant a town where a roadman was arrested on sight, jailed for the crime of having nowhere to be. A man could lose weeks behind bars for vagrancy, set to breaking rocks for a county that wanted free labor more than it wanted him gone. The mark told you to keep your head down and your feet moving, to pass through like weather. It was drawn by men who had felt the iron and did not want a brother to feel it too. Sometimes the warning came too late, and that was its own quiet grief. So far, the marks had been about what others would do to you. A dog, a swindle, a gun, a cell. But the road was not only a gauntlet to be survived. It was a living to be scratched out mile by mile with your hands and your back. The next marks were the ones that told a man where the actual work was and what it would cost him to do it. Number 10, work to be had here. Two crossed shovels plain as the labor they promised, and a roadman's heart lifted at the sight, because work meant a wage, and a wage meant a few more weeks of walking upright. The shovels were honest about what the work would be, digging, hauling, the kind of labor that bent a young man old before his time. A day of it might bring $1, sometimes only a meal and a place in the barn, but it was earned. A man who had been turned away from 100 doors needed to earn something almost as badly as he needed to eat. And the next mark told him to be ready to fight for what little he made. Number 9, be ready to defend yourself. A shape like a spearhead, and it carried a hard message. The danger here was not behind a door or a fence, but loose in the open, and a man had best keep his wits and his fists about him. The road drew desperate company, and not every man at the fire was a brother. A pair of good boots, a coat, the dollar sewn into a hem, these were worth killing for to someone who had even less. The mark did not promise you a fight. It told you not to be surprised by one. Men slept with one eye open in such places and woke whole or did not. Number 8, this house is already burned. A little drawing of a house with a line struck through it meant another roadman had been here first and worn out the welcome. It meant the well of charity was dry, and a knock would bring only a hard word. There is a strange honor in this mark. A hungry man who had every reason to send the next fellow into the same dead end, instead spent his chalk to spare him the wasted miles. The mark saved a man's legs, and on the road, his legs were the only thing he truly owned. In a world that had taken everything from these men, they still troubled themselves to keep a stranger from walking a mile for nothing. The next mark guarded something dearer than legs. It guarded a man's life from sickness. Number 7, sickness lives here, do not stop. A mark that warned of disease of a house or a camp where fever had taken hold, and it told a roadman to keep walking no matter how tired he was, no matter how warm the lamp in the window looked. In the years before a poor man could count on a hospital, a sickness caught on the road was often a sickness one died of on the road, alone, far from anyone who would carry word home. The mark was mercy in the shape of a refusal. "Stay away," it said, "so that you may live." It is a hard thing to be warned off the only shelter for miles, and harder still to heed it. But the men who drew it had buried friends, and they were trying to keep you from joining them. Number 6. The jail here is clean, and they feed the men inside. Strange to call a jail a kindness, but in the deep of winter, with the wind coming off the plains and no barn open to him, a roadman learned to read the marks that told him which lockups were survivable. One set of lines meant a clean cell and a fed prisoner. Another meant they would let you freeze and go hungry behind the bars. A man with nowhere else might get himself arrested on purpose for the warm night and the morning bread, trading his freedom for survival until the cold broke. That a human being could come to see a cell as shelter tells you everything about what those years took from people. The mark did not judge him for it. It only told him which jail would keep him breathing. A clean creek, a kept dog, a swindler, a gun, a fever, a cell. 20 marks down to a handful, and every one of them so far has been about a single house, a single yard, a single danger. But the last marks are different. They are not about one place. They are about the whole road and the men who walked it and the names they left behind, so the road itself would remember them. Number 5. Get out fast. This town wants you gone or worse. A circle with 2 arrows driven through it, and it was the loudest warning in the whole language of the road. It did not mean one bad house. It meant the entire place, the sheriff and the citizens, and the men who waited at the edge of the yard with axe handles had turned against roadmen, and that to linger past dark was to risk a beating or worse. There were towns a man learned never to be caught in once the sun went down, and the mark told him so before he ever saw a single face. It was drawn by someone who had run from that place himself, looking back over his shoulder, and stopped long enough to warn the next man. Even in flight, even in fear, the road kept faith with its own. Number 4. This way lies the road you want. Arrows scratched at crossroads and on the legs of the water tanks, the quiet backbone of the whole system. A man stepping off a train into unfamiliar country needed to know which way led to the next town, which road went to work and which to trouble, and the arrows pointed him true. The honest record tells us the arrows alone were never the whole of it. The real map was carried in men's mouths, passed at the fires, this town good, that yard mean, the bridge south of the river dry and safe. The marks confirmed the word, and the word filled in the marks. Together they moved a man across a continent he had no map for, and the place where word and mark came together, the great bulletin board of the road, was the water tank. Number 3. The water tank, where the road left word for itself. Every steam engine needed water, and so every line was strung with tanks. And a man waiting beneath one with hours to kill did what waiting men have always done. He wrote, on the broad wooden legs of the tanks, in chalk and grease pencil and the point of a knife, roadmen left the news of the rails, who had passed and when, which way they were bound, what lay ahead. Jack London, who rode the rails as a young man long before he was ever a famous author, set it all down in his book, The Road, in 1907. He wrote of standing beneath a water tank and reading the names of the men who had passed before him, and of how a fellow could chase a friend clear across the country, tank to tank, by the word each one left behind. The name a man wrote there had its own word. They called it a monica. One name scratched on a tank for no one in particular, and for everyone who came after. That was the heart of it. And the last 2 marks are not really marks at all. They are what all the marks were always for. Number 2. The monica, the name a man carried when he had nothing else. This is the mark Jack London wrote down in 1907, the one I promised you at the very start, set on the page by one of the most famous authors America ever produced. Long before anyone shrugged this off as folklore, a Monica was a roadman's chosen name, Frisco Jack, Road Hog, names that ran plain and poetic both. And he left it on the tanks and the cars so the rails would know he had been there. The custom outlived the Depression by generations. The filmmaker Bill Daniels spent years chasing one such name, Bozo Texino, a little cowboy with a hat drawn in a loop, for his documentary on boxcar markings, and the rider who carried that name through the 1970s once reckoned he had marked some 30,000 cars in a single year. Think on that. A man whom the country had counted as nothing, who owned no land and held no title, still had a name, and he wrote it on the side of a moving train so that the whole continent would carry it for him. The last mark is the one that holds all the rest. Number 1. The mark itself and the promise hidden inside it. Here is the secret that all 19 marks were keeping. The code was never really about the cat or the cross, the shovels or the spearhead. Strip it down to the bare wood and what you find is a single astonishing idea. That a man with nothing, hungry and hunted and far from home, would stop and spend his last stub of chalk to tell a stranger he would never meet and who could never thank him or repay him the simple truth about what lay ahead. Where the food was, where the danger slept, which way was safe. The scholars are right that we cannot prove how wide the code truly ran. That much of it may have lived more in memory than on any fence. But this part needs no proving, because John Walpole was photographed doing it on the 1st of April, 1939, chalking his cross of thanks on a stranger's wall. The marks were only the handwriting. The thing they spelled out was a covenant that the next person mattered and deserved the truth. That is the real Monica. A man leaves on the world, not his name, his care for the one who comes after. We are told often that the Hobo Code was mostly a romance, a pretty story we tell ourselves about a hard time. And maybe the books drew more signs than any roadman ever truly used. But somewhere in your family, if you go back far enough, there was a kitchen door that a stranger knocked on, and a woman who fed him, and a small mark left quietly by the steps, so the next hungry man would know to come. The code was real in the only way that matters. It was real every time one person told another the truth and asked for nothing back. So here is the one thing to carry out of all of this. The next time someone leaves you something true and expects nothing for it, a warning, a kindness, a word passed quietly so that you will not stumble, recognize it for what it is. It is a Monica, and the only proper answer is to leave one of your own for the person walking behind you. I would like to hear your piece of this. Did someone in your family ride the rails in those years? Or find a strange mark chalked by their door? Tell the story below before it is lost for good. And next time we are going down beneath the floorboards, into the illegal Depression-era gambling rings that ordinary American families ran in their own basements just to keep the lights on, the games, the lookouts, and the law standing at the top of the stairs. Subscribe so you do not miss it. The road always left word for the ones still coming. This was ours.